Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. Time for another show, etc., etc. Okay, we got through that. That's good news. 2 hours to go now, just a little bit under, and looking for content. Yes, here's Bill's morning tweet to start us off. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, says that you need to listen to the whole show today. I gotta come up with the whole show, but you should listen, because what happens during the last 30 seconds will change everything. I need an echo. Change everything. I don't have any echo effects. Maybe I do. I wonder. I should push some buttons and see what happens. There's all sorts of things you could make happen inadvertently on this show. And including content is one of them. Probably the last 30 seconds of the show, of course, will be us saying, thanks, Joan, for coming by today and shouting over the exit announcements. And thanking her once again, and wishing we had another half an hour to talk over another 10 different topics. But we'll try and do our best to get all of that in during the first half of the show. And then we'll just let her run wild for the rest of the show. Lots of things happening today. Lots of Twitter activity that's making me open new tabs and say, ooh, I want to do that. Ooh, I want to do that. Ooh, I want to do that. And yet there's so much that already lies in wait. We'll say, to, jump out from around the corner and surprise you, shock and scare you. That what you find out in the next half an hour will shock and surprise you. Not really, but some of it will be new to you, and that's good news. Got a couple articles to share just by way of getting things going here. I noticed that Greg sent me something this morning on the fantabulous convoys. Those poor guys. I feel so bad for them, having all their money stolen from them. I mentioned yesterday, as a matter of fact, I should circle back and read about that. I did put it, I sent one of the articles on to Scott to put in the roundup post, but in case you didn't get to it, yes, I mentioned that somebody raised a bunch of money for the convoys and then took off with the money. And might even be actually raising more now and showing up at some of these convoy events and insisting, no, I'm still on your side. The money is totally coming. Well, anyway, I guess the latest on things that Greg shared with me, a Daily Beast article under the title of People's Convoy Truckers Escalate DC Tactics, but Fail Miserably Again. So it's really not much of an escalation after all. Zachary Petrizzo, the reporter for the Daily Beast, he's been one I think I saw keeping tabs on Twitter and retweeted it at some point, but now I see it's his subheader to this thing, Beltway 3 Convoy 0, and they're trying mightily to evoke the Canadian experience, flying Canadian flags right along with their American flags, their Gadsden flags, their Trump flags, etc., etc. And that's really the reason it was never going to be anything is because it was trying to imitate something Canadian that, as coordinated as it was, came pretty close to, certainly came much closer than this to becoming something more organic. And, that first time, interesting experience, it's unique, and trying to recreate something like that anywhere else, it's just not really going to work, generally speaking, unless you're a fantastic, just crackerjack professional organizer. And even then, it's still going to be different. But for these people, no, probably not going to work out. And in fact, it hasn't. So here's the reporting on that. After taking a single lap around the Beltway on Monday afternoon, and remember, they were trying to do 2 laps on Sunday, and then they were going to increase the number by 1 each day until their demands were met. And they did end up coming up with some list of demands, and it was ridiculous. And I don't know, did I read it on the air? I think I might have read it out loud at home. And, it's everything from, Joe Biden has to resign, and we got to get rid of the aliens, and stop the Comet Pizza thing, and okay, you get the idea. Anyway, they were going to escalate by a lap a day. Well, they actually went backwards, I guess. So after taking a single lap around the Beltway on Monday afternoon, The so-called People's Convoy once again failed at its goal of being a huge pain for the D.C. metro area after their short-lived Sunday effort failed on Monday morning. The anti-vaccine mandate. Oh, yeah, is that why they're here? Trucker convoy's organizer Brian Braze, B-R-A-S-E, pledged to, quote, escalate the group's tactics, calling on the truckers to take up 2 entire beltway lanes. There are, for the most part, I believe, 4. But that heightened plan did not come to fruition. Instead, the truckers in a bevy of upside-down American flag-bearing support vehicles quickly became separated for the second day in a row, adding insult to injury near the Temple Hills and Landover exits. Both a semi-truck and a pickup truck in the convoy had broken down. A white pickup truck with its hood flipped open caused traffic to reduce to stop and go on the outer loop to the Greenbelt area around 3 p.m. on Monday. Nevertheless, organizers remained optimistic, pledging on Telegram, "We will hold the line," as the group remained split over whether they should enter into Washington, D.C. itself. Washington, D.C. proper, as they say. And somebody did point out, even doing laps around the Beltway, there is about 300 yards of the Beltway, which is some 65, I think, something miles in circumference. Some 300 yards of it actually does sort of kind of pass through a corner of D.C.'s, I guess, territorial waters on their way over, the Wilson Bridge? Anyway, big whoop is the whole deal. So that was of interest, and the tweet that Greg sent to me that accompanied this article. Oh, I clicked on the link to the article itself. But what about the tweet that he sent? Okay, yeah, it's Zach's tweet about the situation, saying things only got worse this afternoon for truckers in the People's Convoy as rain hit their makeshift base out in Hagerstown, leaving plenty of mud after multiple convoy goers broke down on the Beltway where they failed to occupy 2 lanes as planned. So, yeah. Well, it is pretty much a miserable failure. And now it's a muddy, miserable failure. And we know about how difficult it can be to get heavy equipment through mud from the Ukraine invasion. I'm not saying these are Russian troops or Russian-backed even. I think all the Russian money has pretty much dried up. Whether or not that had any impact on turnout or organizing ability, it's hard to say. I don't think anybody really expected great things for this effort to begin with. So, yeah, I don't know if we even need to hang this around the necks of any Russian organizers. They just saw something happening. I guess you could point to the Canadian one and say maybe, but it's not. Well, certainly wasn't beyond the capacity of Canadians to do that themselves, though it has proven beyond the ability of Americans to imitate the Canadians in this without some kind of help. And I don't know if there was any help that really was forthcoming that they could have made use of to really make this a successful effort. Let me go back and take a look at the Washington Post article from the other day about the person who took off with the money, just so we can get the names. And if this nonsense continues as we read more articles, we can say, oh, yeah, look at that. The person is still involved. A nonprofit says it collected over $1.5 million for a D.C. region-bound truck convoy. Its director recently pleaded guilty to fraud, and now they're having difficulty finding where the money is. The report, as I recall, that was the story anyway. Let's make sure. Steve Thompson, Ellie Silverman, and Eric Berger. Well, maybe it is. At the Washington Post. Sorry, Eric. Anyway, at a rally point near the big Texan Steak Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, as the wind whipped American flags atop an 18-wheeler behind her, a Southern California lawyer and anti-vaccine activist named Lee Dundas, D-U-N-D-A-S. It's Lee, L-E-I-G-H, Lee, exhorted a crowd to make donations. Make donations. I exhort you. And then the crowd says, what does exhort mean? And that's probably the level of the discourse there. But we don't need brilliant discourse, do we? We're going to be doing a little altar call up here. Altar as in church. That's where they're used to being asked to give away their money, I guess. 100% of the cash, is going back into the boys' pockets for the next fuel stop, Dundas told onlookers and live stream viewers, encouraging them to give online to the People's Convoy, a U.S.-based group of activists opposed to vaccine mandates and inspired by the self-styled Freedom Convoy that occupied Canada's capital for weeks. the relatively successful one. Anyway, oh yes, right. Someone was pointing out they do need to. I mean, if they want to continue this, they're going to have to raise some money for fuel and food, if nothing else. Somebody estimated, and I have no idea whether it's a good estimate or not. It sounds like an outrageous amount of money, but fuel prices being what they are, and the general poor mileage that semi-trucks get for their fuel dollar. Somebody was estimating that, I guess, to run the 100 trucks that they thought they were going to have, and I don't know whether they really have them. They finally did get a considerable number of trucks at Hagerstown anyway. But to run a bunch of trucks around the Beltway twice was going to cost some exorbitant sum. And I don't know whether I think I saw somebody estimating something like $65,000 worth of fuel being burnt on these things. And I don't know what the numbers are that go into that. Maybe that's real. Maybe that's not real. I have no idea. I think they were saying something like these trucks get like 6 miles to the gallon. And should we do the math? What would that be? So something like 6 miles to the gallon. And every gallon, I don't even know what diesel goes for, but I think fairly expensive. So let's say like $4.50, I'm guessing. And what if it's even more than that? I don't know. I haven't bought any diesel lately. But $4.50 gets you a gallon. That gets you 6 miles, and you need 10 of those to get around. So like 10, 11 gallons to safely make it around the Beltway, the 65 miles. Plus it's the drive from Hagerstown and back. But just the laps around the Beltway will cost you, well, at $4.50 a gallon if we do 10 gallons worth, $45 for every truck. And if you have 100 trucks, obviously, you got $4,500. I don't know how you get to the $65,000. That sounds like maybe they overdid it a little bit. But maybe fuel is more expensive than that, and they're including the drive to and from Hagerstown. Who knows? Now, I shouldn't have started on this because I knew the math was going to be, I don't have the input. Need input. That was just on the other day. Short Circuit, fantastic film, by the way. And yes, I showed that to my kids. They thought it was ridiculous. And of course, they were instantly appalled. Like, is that a white guy playing an Indian guy wearing brown face and pretending to have a terrible Indian accent? And yeah, it was. Sorry about that, America and India, for that matter. That's the 80s for you. Wow. Anyway, also they were struck by the fact that, do you mean Disney's WALL-E just totally ripped off the design from this? Yes, but they can do that because they're Disney. Oh, okay. So it was an important life lesson. It was a good time. A good time was had by all, except for the people who, I guess, did the robot design for Short Circuit, who probably got no money from the Disney people, unless they sued them. Anyway, I was talking about the convoy. Yes? Right. The group set a goal of $5 million to fuel its fight and claimed to have collected $1.5 million by Monday, eliciting growing support across the country from people who've cheered at rallies, demonstrated from chilly highway overpasses, and taken to social media to profess a loss of faith in government, politicians, media, and other institutions as they paint, which they paint as corrupt and out of touch. And guess what? I would paint people who steal $1.5 million and get people to stand out on highway overpasses alone for nothing as corrupt and out of touch, too. I mentioned to Greg yesterday, in a drive down and back I guess sort of the north-south length of Virginia on Sunday, I encountered southbound, interestingly enough, a couple of like campers and pickup trucks, no semis, all decked out in Trump flags and protest banners of all sorts, but heading southbound away from D.C. Not sure where they were headed. On the way back, I encountered no convoy-like traffic, but I did see on 2 or 3 highway overpasses, somewhere between 1 and 5 people on each one of the overpasses, flying flags of various kinds, perhaps parking their pickup trucks there, carrying even more flags. And but these were a good 80 miles south of D.C., somewhere just north of Richmond, and not really sure, but over the northbound lane. So I guess anticipating incoming convoy arrivals, but it was by that time 5 or 6 o'clock, nearly dark, and they were ready to leave. And I don't know. The whole thing seemed like a big waste of time. But probably not to them. Anyway, so all the donors, back to them and their Washington Post story. They want to do something, so they give, in this case, to the AFCLF Foundation, which launched last year and names as its executive director a Texas woman named Pamela Milacek. I'm guessing at that pronunciation, Milacek, whose arrest is sought, records show, by authorities who allege she violated the terms of her community supervision after pleading guilty to felony fraud and exploitation charges in 2020. So, an ancient charge there. People have already forgotten about it, right? I don't know what the AFCLF, did they say what that was earlier? Or maybe they'll explain that later. No, I don't think so. Anyway, maybe we'll find out. Leaders pledged that the dollars collected by the organization, whose initials stand for, here it is, the American Foundation for Civil Liberties and Freedom, they pledged that those dollars collected will go to the truckers and organizing for the convoy. And it's a very dangerous article to read, as I noticed the way the column stacks up. The F in American Foundation for Civil Liberties and Freedom stacks up just above, or very close above the word truckers, and it creates problems visually. Well, anyway, this foundation is a part of a coalition of emerging social media influencers and groups harnessing the grievance of disgruntled voters, many of whom profess a belief in the claim, comprehensively dismantled in courtrooms across the country, that the 2020 election was stolen from President Donald Trump. They don't trust the government, but they are placing their trust in the nonprofit group, which lists among its top issues election integrity, quote unquote, on a website decrying, quote, ideological discrimination, big tech censorship, cancel culture, and forced COVID vaccinations. Oh yeah, COVID vaccinations. That's right. The address listed by the foundation is a co-working space in Boston. A lawyer who lives in California, Christopher Marston, is listed as the foundation's incorporation paperwork as its president, secretary, and treasurer. You should separate those functions, but you don't have to. Dundas, Marston, and other boosters tout the growing numbers of supporters for their convoy, which left California on February 23rd and has amassed about 300,000 followers on Facebook. They got them before the cutoff of the Russian dollars there. I guess the organizers have not detailed their plans beyond saying they won't enter the city after arriving in the D.C. area this weekend, and they haven't so far except for that 300-yard stretch. Dundas, who was seen on video near the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th attack, but said in an interview this week that she was a mile away the entire afternoon, and yet that's not what the video says, has fought pandemic restrictions in Orange County, California, including announcing the then chief health officer's residential address during a May 2020 public meeting, prompting protests outside her home. So that was real nice, but I guess it didn't really have much effect. And Orange County, was that where, I think there was one of the top activists there, what's her name? I can't remember, but we'll pull it up because I have it somewhere, who was among the groups, among one of the most vocal opponents of vaccine mandates, etc. All right, Kelly Earnby, that's right. And she's the one who then caught COVID and died. Just as a, exclamation point on the end of this sentence. Anyway, Marston and Dundas decided to team up after both were inspired by truckers protesting in Canada last month. They say, we want to do something. Let's do exactly that because we're super creative. Those protesters, angry over a rule barring unvaccinated truckers from crossing the border and other public health measures, jammed streets in Ottawa, snarling traffic, and forcing some businesses to close, which is supposed to be the worst crime against humanity ever, but they did it anyway. Supporters of the demonstration in Canada donated nearly $9 million, according to a Washington Post analysis of leaked data, while the AFCLF kept soliciting donations for the U.S. truckers Thursday. Marston, after fielding questions from the Post about its role, alluded to possible changes. There are dynamics going on that may change how this all plays out, he said, without elaborating. Whatever the plan is would change massively as of tomorrow, including whether or not we are involved. So I guess, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I guess there was some chance that after raising $1.5 million, we're not going to be involved in this thing at all. Anyway, because all the money is stolen, I guess. Marston and Dundas reached for connections last month to begin boosting the truckers' plans, taking to conservative media. The AFCLF secured the help of Tampa-based web designer Phil Reale, R-E-A-L-E, listed on the AFCLF's website as a board trustee, to build a donations page. You may be hearing about this soon on the news. Perhaps Hannity already, as I typed this. Reale wrote of the efforts in a February 13th Facebook post. Reale, who declined to comment, wrote that the site collected $5,000 from about 200 donors in the first 24 hours. It's good, but it's not millions. But eventually, I guess it would be. Soon thereafter, Marston and Dundas touted their efforts on Lindell TV, a platform created by Mike Lindell, the pillow guy. Also a creative name there, Lindell TV. We're the nonprofit that's sponsoring the campaign and putting together infrastructure staff, and it takes a lot of staff to pull off something like this, and the volunteers, Marston said. After a spirited discussion about masking, Marxism, globalist leaders, Chinese bioweapons programs, and government incursions on freedom, including, I guess, our dogs have a better right to breathe oxygen than we do. Back to the dogs, like Trump. Dundas made a plea for donations. And it sounded like this. I encourage everybody sitting on the sofa right now listening to this, get in the game, she said. Go to thepeoplesconvoy.org. Don't, by the way. Figure out how you can throw $2, $5, whatever you got, $20,000 at it. Oh, well, that's a good pitch. And maybe I need to record a new one. So my new one is going to be go to patreon.com/KagroX. Figure out how you can throw $2, $5, whatever you got, $20,000 at it. Oh, and here's a good time to stop the action here and say thank you to a new sponsor. How about that? Because it worked already. I've been sitting on this note since the 28th. Matt Tracy, thank you for your contribution to our Patreon fund. You're a patriotic American, and thank you. And I'm going to go buy a truck and get in a one-man convoy to, I don't know, I got to pick up something good. But thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. And you got your name right into the middle of this exciting story about donations. And I think I really am. Now I'm inspired to cut a new promo piece. Probably not for today, but maybe I could work on it today and get into the show later. $2, $5, $20,000. Why not, right? Anyway, supporters who clicked on the website's Donate Now button were sent to the AFCLF's website where they could donate by credit card or cryptocurrency. I don't think I'm going to take that. Or by sending a check. They could also buy a day riding with a trucker for $5,000. I would just say buy a truck at that point. It costs much more than that, but it's a good down payment. For the most part, it's the American people backing the movement, Marston said Monday when asked where the money is coming from. I mean, I'll tell you, 80 to 90% of it has to be smaller denominations that are 1,000 or less. That's a big denomination, but okay. It's really awesome to see that, and I'm sure it is. The AFCLF's website and incorporation paperwork give its address as the 8th floor of 10 Post Office Square in Boston, which is a co-working space, and address that businesses can use to put on business cards, licensing websites, etc. for a promotional rate of $80 a month, according to advertising for the space. So you don't even have to rent an office there. For $80 a month, they'll let you use that on your business cards and websites. So it's the same address Marston gives as his headquarters for his firm, Exemplar Law, which he started in 2005 just after graduating from law school. Well, he got hired right out of law school by himself, but you know. A website for the firm and a constellation of businesses and business entities that Marston calls exemplar companies, he's like Trump, you see, describes a national footprint with 9 satellite locations, probably all co-worker space. The same phone number, though, is listed for all of them, and it goes to an answering service. Marston said Thursday that Exemplar employee Stephen R. Montecone, it's, Montecone, I guess we'll say, with an E on the end, has an office inside the co-working space, and we allow the foundation to use that space. Montecone, who is the registered agent for the AFCLF Foundation, did not return messages. An online tour of the co-working space shows an office with Montecone's name by the door. Marston declined this week to provide the Post a copy of the the foundation's application to become a nonprofit organization. The IRS granted them status as a 501c3 private foundation in August, records show. Marston said the foundation's leadership has broadened since he created it. Obviously, I started the thing, but then we implemented a board and everything else, he said, very official sounding. 2 of the 8 members of the board of trustees listed on the foundation's website are also listed as business executives on Exemplar's website. One of them, Michael Michał, M-E-H-O-W, Michał, I don't know, Michał, oh boy, Pospieszalski, maybe, did not immediately recognize the AFCLF when phoned by a reporter. Ooh, that's not so great. AFCLF, what's that? He asked. Asked whether he knew he was listed as a trustee, he said, no, I am? Later, after receiving a link to the listing, he said he was actually on that board. Asked whether he had been to any board meetings, he said, I haven't been aware of any because I've been super busy with my work, whatever that might be. I'm sure he was. Marston said the foundation brought on 4 full-time employees last month as it prepared to support the convoy, including Milicek, who already had been acting executive director for about 6 months, but didn't need to be full-time until the nonprofit group undertook collecting convoy donations. In 2020, Milicek pleaded guilty to felony exploitation of an elderly person. Oh, that's rotten. After taking nearly $15,000 from the bank account of her then 81-year-old aunt. Collin County, Texas court records show. Boo. What a jerk. Milicek, 57, also pleaded guilty to a separate felony charge of fraudulently using someone's name, social security number, and driver's license number to apply for a PayPal credit card in 2017, court records show. The case involved a different victim. So she's diverse in her attacks. Excellent. Just who you want handling the money. That explains a lot. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I better hurry up if I'm going to get to all these other fun things. Let's get to the fraud, damn it. All right, where were we? Yes, her second victim, including stealing somebody else's, it's identity theft, and applying for a PayPal credit card in 2017 with that stolen identity. Milicek received community supervision and deferred adjudication in those cases, by the way, because now I'm guessing maybe she's white. I don't know. In October, after authorities said she failed to report to her supervision officer, so, they gave her a chance, and then she didn't do any of the things she was supposed to do. And what was the penalty? The penalty is go ahead and raise $1.5 million as a trustee for the convoys. Sure. In October, after she failed to report to her supervision officer, pay court costs, and complete an anti-theft program, all the things that she was supposed to do in order to avoid jail, a judge ordered a warrant for her arrest. The Collin County Sheriff's Office said this week that they have no record of her having been arrested, so you can come up to the truck stop and find her, I guess. Milicek declined to comment about the AFCLF, referring questions to Marston, and she did not return subsequent messages about her guilty pleas, with which you would not really ordinarily get hired anywhere. But again, amazing things happen sometimes when you are a conservative activist. Let's see. Asked about Milicek's criminal record, Marston said via text message Wednesday, "You must have a completely different person, but Pam has no record, buddy." Okay. On Thursday, possible, but sounds right. On Thursday, after receiving more information, he said it was personal family-related stuff, because that is, she stole from her aunt. Not the other one. The credit card one was somebody else, but maybe that was family too. Who knows? Anyway, he expressed a belief in her innocence. I was able to understand the details and the truth and the full story in a way that satisfied us from a foundation standpoint, he said. All right, that was actually very eloquent, sir. Dundas said he does not know Milicek and has not met her, but has seen her name maybe once or twice in passing. Linda Hatmaker. That's a nice name. Anyway, she gave $50 to the cause a couple of weeks ago after having made a hat and sold it, I guess. Said the process seemed secure, and she received an email confirming the donation was tax deductible. When told about Milicek's charges, she said she wasn't concerned. You're talking about one person, said Hatmaker, 56, of Elyria, Ohio. Hope I pronounced that right. You can't dismiss that whole thing. What? You can't dismiss what the whole thing is about because of one person, unless they steal the money, and then you can dismiss it. She said she hoped to catch the convoy before it left Ohio on Friday. She hasn't figured out the logistics by Thursday evening, but she did know one thing for certain. She'd be waving an American flag at somebody, somewhere. And I'm sure she did. A crowd of hundreds cheered the convoy from an overpass in Eureka, Missouri on Tuesday as it took about 30 minutes to pass underneath. Really? Police had blocked the overpass to traffic to accommodate those who lamented loss of liberty. That's funny of them. And grieved over the direction of the country, a feeling many traced to the results of the 2020 election. Eureka Fire Protection District employees brought a fire truck and used the ladder to raise an American flag. A boombox played a clip of a profane chant from fans at a NASCAR event, you know that one, while a supporter held a flag with the same message. People periodically sang the national anthem because that's the thing to do. Anyway, they're singing the national anthem to a flag they had desecrated with this message. Joyce Soroka, who spent more than a year estranged from some family members because she refused to get vaccinated against the coronavirus, named others who had been required to take the shot in protest. I guess she wasn't, but she was there to yell anyhow. This is for the Malloys. Oh, I'm sorry. It's these are first names. I thought she was going to talk about her friends, the Malloys. No, it's the Mollies. This is for the Mollies, the Jakes, the Justins. Totally real people. She said, standing with her mother and other convoy supporters wearing and waving American flags. Brian Brace, the 37-year-old truck driver from Northwest Ohio who helped organize the convoy, said the group wants an end to the national emergency declaration in response to the coronavirus, first issued by Trump in March 2020, but that sucked, and later extended by President Biden, and for Congress to hold hearings investigating the government's response to the pandemic. This is an abbreviated list, but those two things were on the list that I saw circulated on Twitter, along with all of the crazy stuff, which they left out here. On Thursday, as the convoy left Indiana and headed towards Ohio, Indiana State Police spokesman Captain Ron Galaviz estimated that there were about 550 vehicles, mostly cars or pickup trucks, but also about 160 semi-tractors or tractor-trailers. Organizers, including Marston, have put the convoy's number at more than 1,000, because why not? People from other states, including the Northeast region, have posted their own routes on social media in the hope of meeting up with the People's Convoy when it arrives in the D.C. region. However, supporters have been joining and leaving throughout the cross-country trip. Maybe they're not even supporters, making it difficult for officials to predict the size of the group before it reaches a destination. Bray's estimated fuel costs at about $10,000 per day. Marston, who said the number of vehicles in the convoy was, quote, doubling every day, estimated fuel costs much higher. I would imagine at least double that, right? You can figure fuel costs at around $50,000 a day, maybe more, he said. Probably by the middle to the end of it, it could be $100,000 a day. So just the fuel. I mean, forget about food and lodging issues. And there's just a lot of logistics and coordination and permits sometimes. I'm not sure because I didn't check. And it's expensive to run this sort of thing. Or rather, so it's expensive to run this sort of thing. Maybe the fuel costs are being inflated by a factor of 10 and they're keeping the money. I don't know. Maureen Steele, a convoy organizer who appeared alongside Dundas and Marston on Lindell TV, told the Post that a very small percentage of the donations goes to pay AFCLF employees. But the rest is for the convoy's expenses, mostly fuel. Marston said if there's money left over, the truckers will decide what to do with it. Eat it. Flush it down the toilet. What do you think? The truckers are on the finance committee, and there's a lawyer, accountant, Lawyer, accountant. That's what it says. I mean, there's a lot of oversight and making sure money goes to the right needs on the ground for the truckers. He said the truckers have agreed if there was any extra that they're going to be involved in selecting nonprofits that are civil liberties related and appropriate, and they may give to charity and back to the communities. And there's nothing left. Robin Evanco, 61 of South Lyon, Michigan. That Lyon? Right. Said she donated to the People's Convoy 2 weeks ago. I didn't even hear about it 2 weeks ago. She supported the Canadian trucker protest and began following the People's Convoy on Facebook, which led her to the AFCLF's website, told about the director's legal troubles. She said she just hopes her money will go to the truckers. I guess my philosophy is that with these organizations, I'm taking a risk when I give my donation. That's level-headed. And I just hope there are honorable people involved. It's a nice hope. Unfortunately, there are actually convicted felons involved, but whatever. But it doesn't say here that the money is missing. And I was fairly convinced that that was the case, or that they had reported that that had happened at some one or another of these foundations. But maybe I'm confused about that. Could have happened elsewhere, could have happened in Canada, could have not happened at all, I guess. But I should have put it aside when I saw it so that I could back it up. So at this point, I guess I'll have to say, no, I guess I'm wrong. I don't see any proof that the money is missing. It's just perhaps imperiled, you might say. But, maybe not. Maybe for this, she'll be honorable. She steals from her own family, but from your family, never. Well, anyway, good luck to everybody who donated, I suppose. I don't care. At this point, you're out the money, so it makes no difference to me whether it's flushed down the toilet or not. At any rate, okay. Speaking of corrections, I should go back and correct something that I got the wrong impression on yesterday. I have a good record going this week. Yesterday, in glancing at the stories about what Denmark was up to, still very complicated and requires some scrutiny of what's going on in Denmark. But the flash in the corner of my eye that I saw over Twitter was upside down and backwards from what's actually happening. First of all, it's not the case that Denmark is trying to opt out of its obligations to NATO, but rather that it is questioning its role in the joint defense programs of the European Union, of which it is still a member, and they're not looking to Dexit, I guess, from the European Union. But in fact, what they're wondering about is whether they should renew their commitment to the joint EU defense programs from which they have opted out for the past, I think, 30 years or so. It's the opposite. They're looking to get back into the joint European defenses in light of the situation in Ukraine and bumping up their contributions to the joint defense. I think still the EU thing, but not necessarily the NATO thing. And increase their defense budget. So here's the Reuters article about it that Justice sent me to straighten me out. And he reported on it yesterday, I think, in his show. Denmark to boost defense spending and phase out Russian gas. That sounds like a good idea. Denmark will significantly increase its defense budget and aim to become independent of Russian natural gas in response to the invasion of Ukraine. Danish Prime Minister, why did I go down this road? Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, not a bad approximation, said on Sunday, the Nordic country will increase its defense spending gradually to reach 2% of GDP by 2033, equivalent to an increase in annual defense spending of around 18 billion Danish crowns. Kroner, I guess they call them, but that's crowns translated. That's $2.65 billion, I guess, in increase under an agreement between the main parliamentary parties. So, general defense spending back up over 2%, which, of course, Trump will tell you, I did that. That's me. I told them they had to do that. And they did it, you see, except they did it under Biden. And, of course, if it had been, roles reversed and Biden was calling for them to up their contributions to 2% of GDP and it didn't get done until Trump was in office, he would have said, of course, that he deserves credit for it. So, what the hell? We'll just do the same. The parties also agreed to set aside 7 billion kroner to, we'll just use their word, crowns, to over the next 2 years to strengthen Danish defense. And that doesn't mean the pastries, right? Get away from my Danish. I'm spending 7 billion kroner to tell you that message. But also to strengthen diplomacy and humanitarian efforts. So it's hard to pin how much of it is going to be defense, but it's all of a piece. Historic times, they say, call for historic decisions. That was the PM speaking at a press briefing in Copenhagen, adding that this was the largest investment in Danish defense in recent times. Denmark is a NATO member and agreed in 2019 to increase military spending from 1.35% of its economic output to 1.5% by 2023, but had been under pressure from the United States, specifically Trump, to reach the NATO target of 2%. So he got them to go from 1.35% to 1.5% by 2003. Okay. We'll give you partial credit there. Germany said last week that it would sharply increase its defense spending to more than 2%. Wow. And quickly reduce its dependence on Russian energy. That's hopefully going well. Putin's pointless and brutal attack on Ukraine has heralded a new era in Europe, a new reality, Fredrickson said. Ukraine's struggle is not just Ukraine's, it's a test of strength for everything we believe in, our values, democracy, human rights, peace, and freedom. And Danish. So, sounds good. And, by the way, the programs I'm speaking of here, I think they'll finally name them down here. They also agreed, the parties in the parliament there, that a referendum should be held on June 1st on whether to participate in the European Union's Common Security and Defense Policy, or CDSP, almost 30 years after Danes chose to opt out. And now almost 1,000 years after Danes went marauding all over Europe, they're back. So look out. Very interesting. Okay. Denmark won exemptions from some EU policy areas, if you're wondering how they could get away with that, including the euro currency and defense and security policy in a 1992 referendum on the Maastricht Treaty that laid the groundwork for the modern European Union. Okay. So there you go. And at the end, there's the note that there are 6.8 Danish crowns to the dollar currently, just in case you wanted to do your own calculations. Okay, so that's straight too. So good on you, Denmark. Sorry we maligned you with Twitter rumors yesterday that I read incorrectly. But hey, it happens. It's a live show. So let's see. What other fun things are going on that we ought to share? Well, a couple other suggestions made by others. We'll see if we can work them into the show as well. And speaking of having to cut new promos, I can tell you this. You've heard, I'm sure at this point ad nauseum, the promos that we work into the podcast version of the show later in the day. And I'm able to rotate between them to some extent thanks to the efforts of our good friends Gil and Darwin and Scott, who have all cut their own promos. But Gil sent me a note and said, I'm sick and tired of hearing my own voice, and could you please phase this one out? So now we're down one promo, and I don't blame them, and it's actually good motivation for all of us to start again. So I ask you out there, if you're interested in doing something similar, it can be any one of the subjects that we touched on, whether that's doing social media likes for us, or we don't have anything yet about being an evangelist for the show, going out and recruiting new listeners, but that's always something you can do. And of course, exhorting others to submit their own content anytime there's a story that you think we ought to be covering that we're just not getting to, despite your exhorting us to do so. You could pick up your favorite recording device and email the result to me at kagrox@gmail.com. And I'll even clean it up for you if you're worried about ums and ahs. I'll suffer all of that and do my own ums and ahs. And you'll sound clear and clean and professional, and we'll get your story on the air. Or, hey, you can make the pitch for donations too, even if you're not donating yourself. Why, you can just get on the air and say, I'm a huge hypocrite, but I encourage you not to be. It's not too late. Save yourself by sending lots of money to patreon.com/KagroX. And why not? So I encourage you all to do that. I need to cut a new one, both on all the subjects, really, or I guess consider just throwing the whole thing out. But I think every once in a while when you cut a new promo for donations, people say, oh, yeah, that's right, I meant to do that. Or what the hell, I'll give an extra $1 or $2. So it's always worth doing. All right, let's see. Back to the stories I wanted to share with all of you. Oh, yes, you know what? Let's roll back a little further to a story from, I don't know, last week, mid-last week. The story of the weird discovery of the weird investments from Kentucky in a now sanctioned Russian bank, Sberbank. And there was the weird revelation that the top 3 institutional investors or something like that in the bank or institutional shareholders in Sberbank were all from Kentucky, but that I guess the second biggest institutional investor listed here was Kentucky's teacher pension system, but that they also, oddly enough, sold 100% of their shares in the bank on February 23rd, the day before, fortuitously enough, the day before the invasion of Ukraine, which raises red flags, but isn't necessarily, conclusive proof that anything has happened here. You got to investigate and find out what's going on. Anyway, so phone calls were made, inquiries were made by the reporters, explanations offered, and they make some sense. Here from the Courier-Journal, Louisville Courier-Journal, is a piece by Olivia Krauth and Joe Sonka. Joe Sonka picked up on the story right away because he's a big Kentucky reporter and saw it being discussed on Twitter. Kentucky's teacher pension system says it sold its shares of major Russian bank, and it did. I was struck by the weird denial of the situation by the lawyer for the Kentucky Teachers Pension Fund, who said, absolutely categorically untrue. And then it was like, but all we're saying is that you used to be a major shareholder and now you're not. Like, if you can't say that's categorically untrue if you sold, a huge stake in the company. You're not now a stakeholder, that's true, but you were. It's not completely false, right? But as it turns out, as with many things, it was a little more complicated than that. So anyway, reports that Kentucky's pension system for teachers is one of the top shareholders in Russia's largest bank are, quote, completely false, the system's lawyer said Friday. At the close of 2021, the Kentucky Teachers Retirement System was listed as the second largest institutional shareholder of Sberbank in Russia, whose stock prices are tanking amid the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Bo Barnes, TRS's general counsel, said last Friday, TRS sold off its direct investments February 23rd, losing $3.2 million of its initial $15.6 million investment. Russia invaded Ukraine the next day. And on that point, it always looks bad and ordinarily will raise a red flag when something happens like that, and it's, the day before, etc. But as others have pointed out, and again, it does make a certain amount of sense. Well, look, by February 23rd, did we know Russia was going to invade Ukraine? We had been saying that people were warning of it being imminent for days, weeks now. So it may very well be that they said, all right, this is getting pretty serious. We got to dump our shares. And it happens that they did it at the last possible moment, and by, sheer good/bad luck, depending on what you're talking about, they ended up dumping them the day before. They could have been caught flat-footed if they had waited any longer, or they could easily have said, we will do it on February 22nd, and for whatever reason they didn't, or, but we knew it was happening, and we've been meaning to get rid of these shares for the last 3 to 4 days, just dump the position entirely. And we finally did it. And then, bad luck for us, the Russians actually made their decision the next day. That's possible. That is possible. And by the way, the alternative explanation, that is what exactly? I mean, I know I was sort of curious about it myself and a little bit outraged about it because the timing seemed so ridiculous. But if you think about it, what's going to happen? Putin calls the Kentucky Teachers Union? Unlikely. Maybe, Putin insiders with some knowledge about things. If there was ever anything, if there were ever any Russians involved in encouraging the teachers union or anybody else, most likely some of the wealth funds, the hedge funds, to invest in Sberbank, they might have called up and said, remember that investment I told you you should make? You should probably unmake it. That also could have happened. And I don't know. But at any rate, there are other explanations for it that are not entirely ludicrous, right? As opposed to the more ludicrous idea that, Russia just called me and said I should divest. Well, okay. Anyway, it says here, we actually got out at a very good time because we were able to sell on the 23rd when you could still get some good value on your Sberbank shares, Barnes said. But they did lose $3.2 million. It's not like they made a killing. And also, usually, you'll trigger an insider trading inquiry when somebody makes a killing, selling things off the day before a giant disaster. When somebody makes a $3.2 million loss selling off before a major disaster, you tend to let it go. Even though, they could have lost $15 million, right? And they cut their losses based on, that there's a basis for an investigation. Barnes said the timing of the sale was a tactical decision by their external investment manager in response to the publicized threat of sanctions against Russia should it invade Ukraine. TRS continues to have de minimis indirect exposure through two international funds managed by outside investment managers, Barnes said. So there you go. There's a little bit more here too. And I was wondering about when they're going to get around to explain some of the alternatives. TRS's remaining exposure to holdings in Russia is proportionately negligible in a portfolio of about $26 billion, Barnes said in a statement Friday. So even losing $3 million out of $26 billion, not the end of the world. About $30 million of TRS's $26 billion investment portfolio, around 0.12%, is in Russian investments, Barnes previously said. Barnes added that their stake in Sberbank consisted of $15 million in investments over several years, beginning in 2017, with the loss at their February 23rd sale offset by dividends of about $3 million paid over that time frame, resulting in a net gain of about $200,000. Is that right? I mean, It sounds to me like they made a $3.2 million loss, but they were paid $3 million of dividends, so it's really a net loss of $200,000. I don't know how they frame that as a net gain, but maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was $3.4 million in dividends. I don't know. That's odd. Around $35.3 million of the Kentucky Public Pension Authority's $22 billion portfolio is exposed to Russian securities, the group said in a statement on Friday, about 0.15% of its funds. David Eager, KPPA's, whatever that is, Kentucky Public Pension Authority's executive director, said they're trying to determine the best financial strategy. He noted they're legally bound to manage assets from the best investment perspective, not for political reasons. As much as we want to support Ukraine during this invasion by Russia and liquidate Russian investments in our funds, KPPA trustees and their employees are fiduciaries for their members and their beneficiaries, and so they're a little bit restricted in what they're going to do. Other states have recently pulled out of Russian assets because of the country's invasion of Ukraine. Earlier this week, Connecticut, there you go, Greg, pulled more than $218 million in pension funds from Russian companies. Prior to TRS saying the shares were sold, U.S. Representative Thomas Massey, a Republican who represents Northern Kentucky, called the TRS investment unfortunate. And that as it may be, but Thomas Massey, no genius there. Let's see. He was earlier, by the way, one of 3 representatives to vote against a House resolution backing Ukraine's sovereignty and calling for an immediate ceasefire. Okay. So I'm not certain what he even means by it being unfortunate. At any rate, some others who were reporting on the subject and discussing it on Twitter made mention of the fact that it was likely that, or possible anyway, that they had been invested in Sberbank because they were taking the advice of a hedge fund or even buying into a hedge fund that was buying these foreign assets. And it was suggested that the Todd Group, which was listed as the top institutional investor in Sberbank, also based in Kentucky, might have been the one that advised them to do that and may in fact have sold them the shares in an effort to bring them on board as a client. So, I don't know. I guess it's all possible. And there's some more reasonable explanation for all of it than originally thought. But it seems to me, I think it struck me the day we read the story, that $15 million, I felt like $15 million was not enough to make you the second largest institutional investor in a bank. but I guess it is. Maybe they just limit the amount of foreign investment even allowed in Sberbank, or maybe I misunderstand the situation. But it seems to me like if you were going to be the second largest institutional investor in a bank, you'd probably be putting more money in there than 15 million. But at any rate, glad that's cleared up, aren't you? Okay, nearing the top of the hour. Let's see if we can squeeze in another story, at least story concept. I wanted to introduce this idea, and this apparently widely shared BBC article under the title of Ukraine War, My City's Being Shelled, But Mum Won't Believe Me, by Maria Korenyuk and Jack Goodman. And the basic gist of the story here, since we won't have time to read through it, that yes, there are many people living in Ukraine, I guess ethnic Russians, who have plenty of family left living in Russia proper. And this brings up the problem of news consumption and real news availability inside Russia. This woman saying she's calling family back there and saying, yeah, it's really true, because they're telling, I guess, Russian citizens on the news, I think, holding things pretty close to the vest, not showing certainly any war footage that would be detrimental to their position. But they're telling the people there, as we understand, they've been telling a lot of their soldiers, at least their conscripts, that this is some sort of peacekeeping mission or denazification mission. And they're the good guys in all of this. But as this woman writes, she's been communicating with family back in Russia, and they simply don't believe that Russia's army could be used in this way, to be shelling Ukrainians, because it's appalling to them to think about that as a possibility, just as allegedly some of the soldiers felt. And that's why they allegedly surrendered upon realizing that it would be their assignment to fire on Ukrainians, so like themselves. So anyway, lots of, restrictions of the information diet causing problems. And I did see somebody pointing out on Twitter today, this will cause generations to come in Russia to have a hard time understanding why the rest of the world doesn't trust Russia. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I feel like I want to share this article with you, but I want to jump out to another that parallels it, a piece from the New Yorker, which I guess helps explain some of it. How Putin wants Russians to see the war in Ukraine, and I guess they are seeing it this way. That's the upshot of the other article. This one, though, by Masha Gessen, again in the New Yorker. Subtitle here, even if his hold on power is precarious, he can still convince Russians that the whole world is conspiring against them. And that is problematic in itself, as I've said. Somebody mentioning, it's going to make it difficult for Russians to understand why they're being treated the way they're being treated, and continue to feel like they're being persecuted by the international community. Let's read a little bit of this one. Take a walk through Moscow these days, and you will see giant gaudy light displays, entire galleries and faux building facades composed of light bulbs. You will see gleaming arrays of luxury goods, messengers scurrying with cubic backpacks. That sounds interesting. And restaurants that fill up late in the day and stay full well into the night. Some of those restaurants have giant televisions, and you may see sports competitions, music videos, and news channels on them. You won't see Eurovision, though, because they got kicked out of Eurovision, another one of the big sanctions. Oh, and by the way, yes, right, the killer sanction I saw, the boom lowered yesterday, Adidas won't sell tracksuits in Russia anymore. That's going to make them surrender. I think that's a good one. So, all right. I don't know if that's a confirmed truth, but it was either a great joke or a great idea. Anyway, true about the Eurovision thing, I heard. I don't know if I have any proof of that, but okay. What proof do you really need? It's a song contest. Who cares? Millions of people care, but okay. I don't, so that's enough for me. All right, so you could be seeing music videos, sports, news, whatever, but what you'll not see is what dominates television screens everywhere else in the world, the images of war in Ukraine, or at least, okay, in the West. Some people might not care about it. Anyway, you will not see bomb shelters in the grand Soviet-era subways, bombed-out apartment buildings, or charred tanks. From most appearances, Moscow is a city at peace. Anything that disrupts this appearance, whether it's a person standing alone with a sheet of paper that says no to war, or the small group that gathered and stood silently in Moscow's Pushkin Square on Saturday night, or the thousands who have attended anti-war marches around the country since last Thursday, the day that Russia began its large-scale invasion of Ukraine, is intercepted by police quickly and brutally. Occasionally in Moscow, you might see a clump of police officers in riot gear and a prisoner bus parked on the side of the road, its engine off, which means that the people inside are getting very cold as the bus slowly fills up. In the center of town, police buses have been parked for days, apparently on reserve in case of a larger operation. OVD Info, an organization that tracks political persecution, has documented about 6,400 detentions since last Thursday in more than 100 cities. 2,800 of those in 56 different cities were on Sunday, February 27th, on the 7th anniversary of the murder of the opposition politician Boris Nemtsov. Last Thursday evening, Grigory Yudin, a sociologist and philosopher, and his wife Anastasia Yudina, a marketing researcher, went to Pushkin Square to protest the invasion. They got off the subway, and then Yudin told me, something happened. I realized I was falling down. Yudina was taking a picture of the swarms of police in riot gear at that moment. When she turned around, her husband had disappeared. Yudin had been loaded onto a police bus, and with many other people, he was taken to a precinct on the outskirts of the city. The next time that Yudina saw him was about an hour and a half later. It was in an ambulance outside the police station. He was in a neck brace, she told me. He was covered with dirt. They must have dragged him. He was confused. Yudin had been in and out of consciousness. When we met on Sunday at one of those cozy and delicious Moscow restaurants, Yudin still had a swollen eye and a noticeable scrape on his left temple. We weren't meeting to discuss the story of Yudin's arrest and beating. Those stories are plentiful. But because Yudin is one of the most insightful analysts of contemporary Russian politics and society. I think now it is a turning point, he said. We were talking about the end of the world as we know it. Would it be the end of Vladimir Putin's long reign or, well, the end of the world? If they can't secure a military victory, at least take Kyiv and Kharkiv, then Putin will shift to treating U.S. sanctions as a declaration of war. It'll be the world against Putin, and Putin will have to raise the stakes by, say, threatening to lob a nuclear weapon at the center of the world, which he believes is in New York. We had our phones off during this conversation. When I turned mine back on after about an hour, I saw that Putin had put Russian nuclear forces on high alert. So it begins, Yudin said. And yet, he added, in this new situation, I can't really imagine that he will be able to maintain his hold on power. On the other hand, we have always underestimated his ability to hang on. Russian news channels released a short clip of Putin ordering his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, remember him? We mentioned his name the other day, and head of the general staff, Valery Gerasimov, the two of them sitting next to each other like two kids summoned to the principal's office, looking weary and bloated, to raise Russia's level of nuclear readiness. State television presented the president as confident and decisive, but it seemed apparent Putin felt that he had been misled by his military. He had clearly miscalculated on at least two counts, Yudin said. It appears that the generals had promised Putin a blitzkrieg that had already failed. Putin himself, it seems, had imagined that Ukrainians would welcome the Russian military with open arms. It's this concept that there is no such thing as Ukraine, an insane idea on which he had based an entire military operation, Yudin said. Putin appears to have wildly underestimated Ukraine's military and the Ukrainians' resolve. We have a parallel situation, I guess, we can't tell how much he really believed and how much he was just trying to make himself and others believe, similar to here in the United States, as we face the peril of possibly having to make a decision about whether or not to put Donald Trump on trial for his role in the insurrection, when we know that he will claim, how could I have been leading an insurrection in contravention to the Constitution when all I was doing was upholding it because I truly believed that the Constitution was being violated by the other guys? And the question will be, can you make a jury see the difference and why it's important to convict the next president on this score and not just let him go. And, a lot of people have doubts about whether federal prosecutors are going to have enough confidence to go forward with something like this. And I think they're probably right in terms of whether or not federal prosecutors will have that confidence. Doubting that they have that confidence is probably the better bet, even though it really shouldn't be any sort of an excuse. And by now we should be able to understand, and the jury should be able to understand, the difference between somebody who truly believes something and somebody who just needs to make you believe that they're so stupid that they believe something like that. And even if that were the case, even if he really was too stupid to understand that the election hadn't been stolen from him, to switch topics, right? It certainly means he's incompetent to be president, right? But will his supporters believe that? No, it makes him even more competent to be president. Whatever. Anyway, similar problem here in Russia. We'll never find out, and also no one will ever put him on trial. It'll have to be, more final than that. Even the shrewdest dictators, which usually means the most paranoid, and he's certainly one of them, often come to overestimate their reach, their popularity, and their wisdom. They surround themselves with sycophants, shut out the rest of the world, and usually, sooner or later, make a misstep. Over his 22 years at the helm, Putin has winnowed down his circle of interlocutors. In the past 2 years, fear of COVID has forced him to near total isolation. This is a huge factor. Mikhail Fishman, who hosts the political analysis show on Russia's last independent television channel, TV Rain, said, he is alone with only his most loyal people who basically live with him, his adjutants, his servants, in a way, who make his way of life possible. They are in the same pool, sharing the same vision, and there is nothing else. They, of course, think he is sent by heaven to save the world. Sounds familiar. What small ways Putin once had of checking in with outer reality have fallen away during the pandemic. One example is the conference of Russian and foreign political scientists that he has gathered every fall since 2004, but in 2020 he came to the event only virtually, and last year he isolated himself from the gathering and appeared in person only once, to allow the attendees to ask him questions. He sat on a distant stage with a moderator who had been quarantining for 2 weeks. According to Fishman, Putin's closest advisors, if they request a meeting, must first sequester. As we wrapped up our late lunch on Sunday, Yudin argued for his right to pick up the tab. I have to spend this anyway, he said, because Russian currency would soon become worthless. Tomorrow, markets will collapse, he predicted. Sounds right. And then Russians would begin to grasp the scale of the catastrophe that the country was facing. The next morning, the markets did crash. The Central Bank of Russia raised its interest rate to 20% and froze the opening of its stock market. The ruble reached the historic low of 90 to $1, and Sberbank announced that it would charge some 40% more for actual dollars than it did before the war. Banks appeared fearful of running out of hard currency, and rumor had it, some bank machines were running low on rubles. But by Monday, there were no observable bank runs in the Russian capital. 2 centrally situated branches of M-Video, an electronics and appliances chain, were almost completely empty. No one seemed to be rushing to invest in durable goods. Taxis, car share vehicles, and messengers on scooters and bicycles, all the visible signs of Moscow's e-commerce and cyber convenience were in place, even if credit cards, both foreign and domestic, were occasionally failing. In the evening, a long line of fashionably dressed young people were waiting for cappuccinos at a coffee shop at Flacon, or Flacon, I don't know how you pronounce this one of several industrial plants in the city that have been converted to commercial use. A barista kept cheerfully announcing that Apple Pay, Google Pay, and MasterCard weren't working, but Visa was welcome. In fact, Apple Pay and Google Pay had been restricted since the first major tranche of sanctions kicked in, but some of the coffee shop's customers didn't seem to know that. Did they know that the main Russian banks had now lost access to SWIFT? Either way, no one seemed panicked. 2 of my friends went to stock up on non-perishables. Both reported that the supermarkets where they got their toilet paper, coffee, and pasta were otherwise doing normal, slow, daytime business. So they might just not be awake to this yet. Russians would very soon feel the combined efforts of a precipitous drop in currency prices, Western export bans, and airspace closures. Everything was about to become more expensive and scarce, But economic anxiety, requires a sort of consensus of uncertainty, and Russians have been through several economic crashes before, in 1992, 98, 2008, 2014. They know that they can survive them. This time, more than ever, they know that their hardship stems from sanctions imposed by the West. The whole world is conspiring against Russia. And that is why, according to Putin, Russia is doing what it's doing in Ukraine in the first place. Problematic. Russian authorities have banned words like war or invasion to describe what they want to call a special operation in Ukraine. On Saturday, the Communications Oversight Authority demanded that 10 media outlets, including TV Rain and Novaya Gazeta, which is edited by the Nobel Peace Prize recipient Dmitry Muratov, remove reports that describe the war as a war, or else providers would block their websites and impose fines. Some coverage appears to have been blocked, and several outlets have started to tread more carefully. TV Rain, for example, changed its live broadcast chyron from War in Ukraine to What's Happening in Ukraine. On Tuesday, the authorities ordered internet providers to block access to the websites of TV Rain, and the independent radio station Echo of Moscow, and took Echo off the air. In the absence of war, there can be no casualties. 8 years ago, when Russia invaded Ukraine the first time, all the while denying that Russian troops were present in the country, investigative journalists, particularly those from Novaya Gazeta, found ways to tell the truth. They used soldiers' social media posts to show that the fighters were on Ukrainian territory, and they found some of their graves. Last year, the military banned the use of possession of smartphones by soldiers, not very effectively, I guess. A new law that went into effect on February 1st of this year legalized the use of mass graves during wars and states of emergency. These measures may make it easier to hide the real numbers of military losses or the fact of any casualties at all. In the first 5 days of the invasion, Ukrainian sources have reported Russian losses in the thousands. Russians are not releasing numbers. Before I headed to Russia last week, I called Valentina Melnikova, one of the founders of the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers, a once sprawling organization that was formed in 1989 to confront the brutality and secretiveness inside the Russian military. I think we've heard of their story before, right? But only in a short excerpt from an article, I think. Anyway, Melnikova, who is still active, told me that the organization was a shadow of its former self, and in particular, no longer had chapters in many southern Russian cities near the border with Ukraine. The women who once would have worked to connect families and count casualties have either retired or been cowed into passivity. On Sunday, the committee wrote to the International Red Cross to appeal for help in finding and bringing home the bodies of Russian soldiers who have died in Ukraine. While news channels around the world broadcast special reports from Ukrainian cities that are being bombarded by the Russian military, Russian newscasts on state-controlled channels, which have a monopoly on broadcast television, are short and uneventful. On Monday morning, the newscast on Rossiya, this would be last Monday, one of the official state channels, contained 4 headlines. The UN Security Council has discussed the situation in Ukraine. The West continues to pump Ukraine full of arms. Refugees from the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic continue to arrive in Russian cities. So there is an exodus, or well, at least they're reporting an exodus. I'm not certain whether it's really happening or not, but that's the answer to some of the discussion you and I had, Brian Monroe. The other headline here, the European Union is closing its airspace to Russians. The foreign ministry is working on evacuating Russian citizens. In other words, the world is ganging up on Russia, which is busy saving its people who are forced to flee both Ukraine and the European Union. All of this was bland and bloodless. Videos showed the Russian representative of the UN Security Council who looked bored and angry, and women and children arriving from eastern Ukraine who looked tired. The audience of broadcast television skews older. Younger people get their news from the internet. There are a few habitual viewers of TV Rain or readers of independent Russian language media outlets, which are getting increasingly difficult to access without using virtual private networks. Tens of millions of people don't go looking for news unless they think something big or frightening is happening, and right now, a casual Russian internet user has no reason to think such a thing. I talked to Lev Gershenzon, who used to run the news arm of Yandex, which I finally learned was Russia's largest technology company, and second largest search engine, a sort of Google, Uber, and Amazon in one. Yandex's homepage usually runs 5 headlines at a time. Most people just look to see if anything has happened. And if they have a sense that nothing is up, they never click through on a headline. When there is some emergency, click-through traffic jumps by a factor of 2 or 3, Gershenzon said. That's why it's so important for the authorities to avoid the word war. For Russians, even 3 generations removed from the Second World War, the word war is scary. Special operation or military operation just isn't. The Yandex homepage is so boring, Gershenzon said, because by agreement with the government, the search engine's algorithm pulls headlines from only a small pool of state-controlled media outlets. On Sunday, Gershenzon, who left Yandex News in 2012 and who now lives mainly in Berlin, wrote an appeal to current Yandex staff on his Facebook page. Every day of Russia's war against Ukraine is made possible because there are no real mass anti-war protests in cities of Russia. This is not so much because people are afraid of repercussions, but mostly because the vast majority of the population doesn't know that the Russian military has been waging full-scale war for the last 4 days. If the 5 headlines on the Yandex homepage were to show something like the truth, that would bring the end of the war closer. If this space were empty, that would also be good because it might compel people to think and ask questions. But every hour and day that it functions the way it's working now, it's supporting the war effort. In his post, Gershenzon called upon current Yandex employees to contact him. He had an idea for engineering the display of truth on the search engine's homepage. It might have lasted only an hour or hour and a half, but that would have made a difference, he told me, and screenshots would have remained. No one has answered his call. But would a sudden exposure to a true headline have swayed or even impressed people who, like the majority of Russians, seem to either be unaware of the war or support it? Yudin, whose academic interest is in opinion polling and its use in democracies, he's not a fan, it said that public opinion is notoriously difficult to measure. This is particularly true for an atomized country in which propaganda machines have supplanted most media. Still, he felt that he could make a few generalizations. I don't know whether he's talking about us or them. People seem to be tired of Putin, he said, and Putin seems to feel himself teetering. His regime, Yudin believes, rests on a hollow kind of legitimacy that it itself manufactures. People recognize Putin's authority because they think that the population is behind him. He swings the big stick of this ostensible legitimacy to threaten and subordinate the bureaucrats, the elites, and the people. For example, when the country holds what it calls elections, bureaucrats are forced, under the threat of losing their jobs, to herd state employees to the polls to vote for Putin, who then uses their votes to assert his popularity and his right to continue imposing his will on the very people who just voted for him under duress. It's like, well, this is his idea. It's like being raped and forced to make the very thing that will be used to rape you again, Yudin said. Well, it could have been perhaps a different crime, but okay. They're not up to on the latest in the way we discuss things here in the United States. Anyway, the very presence of Ukraine, a familiar society that is developing a different political system, is a threat to Putin. For him, it's the anti-Russia, Yudin said. Putin decided to boost his legitimacy by conquering Ukraine, but his actions are based on false premises and on bad information, which may break his legitimacy perpetuation cycle. An atomized society held together by a hermetically sealed ideology can change its collective mind with barely a warning. Russia saw this happen in the late 1980s, when Soviet society was seemingly transformed, apparently overnight, by glasnost. If a sea change is going to happen again, it may happen now, when Putin has assembled every possible force against himself. Even a handful of Russian billionaires who have been loyal to Putin have cautiously, very cautiously, called for peace. if not his death. Putin likes to tell a story from his childhood about a rat that he tried to chase into a corner until the rat gave chase after him. The story keeps coming up in my conversations in Moscow. No one who has ever heard it doubts that the adult Putin identifies with the rat. He is a rat with a nuclear button and a police state at his disposal. If this is the end of his reign, the events that may surround his downfall are chilling to contemplate. All right. Well, that helps fill in the blanks. And then I guess, like I said, from the more personal perspective, I could read us a little bit of the story of the woman who has trouble convincing her mother back in Russia that this war is actually happening. And we'll jump around a little bit here. Just saying, Alexandra and her 4 rescue dogs have been sheltering in the bathroom of her flat in Kharkiv since the shelling began. She's telling her story here. When she first heard the explosions, I ran out of the house to get my dogs from their enclosure outside. People were panicking, abandoning their cars. I was so scared, she says. The 25-year-old has been speaking regularly to her mother who lives in Moscow, but in these conversations, and even after sending videos from her heavily bombarded hometown, Alexandra is unable to convince her mother about the danger she's in. It's a little bit like our Fox News bubble here, right? I didn't want to scare my parents, but I started telling them directly that civilians and children are dying, she says. But even though they worry about me, they still say it probably happens only by accident, that the Russian army would never target civilians, that it's Ukrainians who are killing their own people. It's common for Ukrainians to have family across the border in Russia, but for some, like Alexandra, their Russian relatives have a contrasting understanding of the conflict. She believes it's down to the stories they are told by the tightly controlled Russian media. Alexandra says her mother just repeats the narratives of what she hears on Russian state TV channels. This really scared me when my mom exactly quoted Russian TV. They are just brainwashing people, and people trust them, says Alexandra. I feel the same way. My parents understand that some military action is happening here, but they say, Russians came to liberate you. They won't ruin anything. They won't touch you. They're only targeting military bases. While we were interviewing Alexandra, the shelling went on. The internet connection was weak, so we had to exchange voice messages. I've almost forgotten what silence sounds like. They're shelling nonstop, she said. But on Russian state TV channels on the same day, there was no mention of the missiles striking Kharkiv's residential districts, of civilian deaths, or of 4 people killed while queuing for water. Russian media says the threat to Ukrainian civilians doesn't come from the Russian armed forces. It comes from the Ukrainian nationalists using civilians as human shields. Russian state TV channels justify the war by blaming Ukrainian aggression and continue to call it a special operation of liberation. Any Russian outlet using the words war, invasion, or attack faces being blocked by the country's media regulator for spreading deliberately false information about the actions of Russian military personnel in Ukraine. And now a new law has passed through the Russian parliament that means people who spread, quote, fake information about Russia's military forces could be jailed for up to 15 years. Some Russians have taken to the streets to protest against the war, but these demonstrations were not shown on the main state television channels. Who have we here? Mikhailio, a well-known Kyiv restaurateur, didn't have the time or inclination to watch Russian TV coverage of the invasion. When shelling of Ukraine's capital started, he and his wife were concentrating on how to protect their 6-year-old daughter and baby son. At night, their children woke up at the sound of explosions and couldn't stop crying. The family made the decision to move to the outskirts of Kyiv and then flee abroad. They traveled to Hungary, where Mikhailio left his wife and children and came back to western Ukraine to help the war effort. He was surprised not to have heard from his father, who works at a monastery near Nizhny Novgorod, in Russia. He called his father and described what was happening, and his father replied that this wasn't true. There was no war, and in fact Russians were saving Ukraine from Nazis. Mikhailio said he felt he knew the power of Russian propaganda, but when he heard it from his father, he was devastated. My own father does not believe me, knowing that I'm here and seeing everything with my own eyes, and my mom, his ex-wife, is going through this too, he says. She is hiding with my grandmother in the bathroom because of the bombardment. Okay, that's what she's going through. Russian media has been tightly controlled for many years, and viewers are given an uncritical view of Russia and its actions around the world. The state narrative only ever shows Russia as the good guy, says Dr. Johanna Sostek, an expert in Russia and political communications at the University of Glasgow. We'll break off here. There's more to the article and more examples of it. I think you get the idea, and I think we can commiserate with them in all the parents and grandparents that we may have lost to Fox News over the years. Maybe we should do something about this before we go down the same path. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us, and, she's expressed an interest in the stories we were just reading, so I'm sending her a nice link to that New Yorker piece. I guess that's on your mind this morning, something you're working on?
It's been on my mind for about a week, the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers.
Okay.
And
why?
how Ukraine is really, really smart in the social campaign here in specifically trying to engage that committee, what's left of it. As you may know, in my previous life, I studied Russian stuff.
Yes, a lot of us did. wasted the 1980s on that, yeah.
I've got a couple of degrees in Russian studies, which
okay.
every now and then become relevant again,
yeah.
like right now. One of the things I was working on in graduate school was a project of with a nonprofit in Seattle called the, what did we call it? Center for Civil Society International.
Okay.
And we compiled a whole book on all of the NGOs operating in what were the former Soviet Union. We were calling it FSU then.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And Committee of Soldiers' Mothers was sort of the biggie of all of them. It actually started in Perestroika and Glasnost under Gorbachev.
Okay.
It was sort of the first really effective non-governmental organization, element of civil society to emerge in that time, and was remarkably effective. Nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for trying to end the Chechen War. It did get another Peace Prize for it, and it escapes my mind which one it was. But it's a long-standing and very effective organizing group there.
Okay.
Or it had been pre-Putin. Because of its success in the Chechen War, in exposing what the military was doing to its own recruits. Putin has fairly successfully, I think, suppressed them, like you were saying, particularly in southern Russia. And in probably, because it was also outside of just Russia, it was in the various former republics. I don't know how effective it is there anymore either in the other republics. But this is a committee that everybody in Russia knows.
Okay. Yeah, it occurs to me now, I remember earlier propaganda operations in Ukraine. I mean, in the good sense.
No, it is propaganda. Yeah.
But it is propaganda,
So,
and that they made the efforts to say. I think the captured Russian soldiers or if they surrendered, were being fed and then given an opportunity to use people's cell phones to FaceTime with their mothers in particular, and that they even made an offer to deliver the soldiers back to the Russian border if the moms would agree to meet them on the other side or something. I don't know whether that was like real or
yeah, I don't know if that one
just
was
a
real.
propaganda
I saw
offer,
mentions of
but
it, I
don't know how you
apparently
get to the border.
it was an official Ukraine government offer. I don't know, whether
they
whether
did
it was
it
for
anybody.
propaganda purposes, whether they actually tried to put it into place. But yes, they did offer that. Really smart
Interesting.
propaganda on their part,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
that's the most effective way of getting into Russia and getting the word into Russia about what's going on is through these women. And one of the more effective ways of trying to combat what Putin is doing in trying to convince the whole of Russia that this is a war against Nazis and drug addicts.
Amazing that they're able to make inroads with that. But these two articles from today indicate that that's working. I think I now remember that where I first heard of the Committee of Mothers. So how do they style themselves? The
Committee of Soldiers' Mothers.
Soldiers' Mothers. Yes, I think that my first, or at least the last time I remember hearing about them was an article about their efforts to locate sons who had died in various secret excursions and secret missions, or had died in the service of some of the mercenary forces that were used by the Russians in Syria and elsewhere, and the incredible difficulty they were finding that, I guess, Putin sort of planned his way around them by just having his military operations taken care of mostly by non-official forces, but that people were still dying, but they were just erased when they were dead because it was non-official operations, and I don't know. So this committee was finding itself stymied by the fact that they were just conducting their wars illegally instead, and not telling anybody about who had died where or what had happened to these people. So now I recall that. I can't remember that. I'll see if I can dig up that story just for my own self. But
well, that would be helpful to me
if
too.
it helps
this
you,
is turning
I'll share it.
Another graduate school project. I wanted to write this story a week and a half ago, and I keep finding other bits to it. So it's sort of it's beginning to look like my master's thesis.
Okay,
in not a good way.
Well, it's nice that all of your studies become relevant again, and except that it usually takes a war to do it. But
yeah,
well, that was Soviet studies, really. I mean,
Soviet and then Russian.
Yeah, it's the same people. They didn't just drop their entire culture just because they changed the political structure. But okay, well, it's unfortunate to say the least. But I'll see what I can dig up about that thing, and I also need to see if I can find confirmation of Adidas's decision to stop selling
I don't think
tracksuits.
that was real. It was a joke that I saw.
It looked like a good one
last week.
But that would pretty much kill the whole thing. I don't know. I don't know what they'd wear. So
the cultural stuff's important. Let's just add in, because particularly the sports stuff. I mean,
that's true.
Because Putin particularly puts so much emphasis on that. He's been kicked out of the Judo Federation. He's been kicked out of the Taekwondo Federation. For him personally, that's a big deal.
Okay.
That, we're back. He's very much in the Soviet genre of leader in putting an outsized influence on sport and how Russia competes internationally. So that's one of the things that is really effective, I think. And it's a big deal to the Russian people, too.
Yeah.
All of this competition. So that's one really good cultural area to sort of tell Russians exactly how big of a deal this is.
Yeah, I wonder whether
how much of a problem Putin is. The Committee of Soldiers' Mothers, is really important here.
Yeah, well,
I'm
I could see
fixated
that.
on this one, but looking ahead, provided that we can get out of this without the total destruction of Eastern Europe, if not all of Europe,
Or everything else.
it's really hard not to think nuclear on this. But if somehow Putin can be undermined internally,
Yeah.
it's going
I
to be
hope.
really important as it was at the end of the Soviet Union, to get in there and start rebuilding civil society, to start strengthening the people. And
Yeah,
it's
that'd be
also
nice.
important in trying to undermine Putin internally among his inner circle, to have the people see what's going on, to have the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers starting to raise these questions, and to give Putin's inner circle more of an idea of the people having their backs if they depose him.
Oh, yes, okay.
All of this stuff is the knot I'm trying to unravel in writing.
Yeah.
I'm not being very coherent today because I'm trying to think of all of this stuff I'm trying to write and tease it out.
Well, it's not,
And
yeah.
talking out loud helps me. So,
You haven't worked it out yet, but, right, well,
so
that's
in getting rid of Putin now,
understandable.
or in trying to somehow contain his power, this civil society aspect is really critical, and it's really critical coming out of the Putin era.
Yeah. Well, I
I
can see what you
really,
mean.
really hope there are very smart people in Washington, D.C. right now thinking about the lessons we learned from coming out of the Soviet Union and how America responded to that in not so
Yes.
great ways,
Yes.
and
We'll
how
need to
to
change our
engage
approach.
with Russia post Putin and trying to bring it back into some semblance of a not
Civil
democracy
society.
necessarily, but anyway, how do we make Russia not end up with another Putin?
Yeah, and it'll be awfully difficult to avoid that because, everyone's memory will be of the Wild West opportunities. Well, I won't be that bad. I just want to, why should I miss out on my opportunity to make a billionaire's fortune in the wake of the collapse? Like last time, it was this other set of people, and they just privatized everything and stole all the money, and it appears to have gotten away with it, and they now run the place as oligarchs. Why couldn't I have a piece of that? But I promise to be better. It'll be really interesting to see who we decide to lend legitimacy to if if Putin's deposed, or who
Which is a big
internally
if.
moves for this. Yeah, of course.
And I don't see how it happens. It's how it's always happened in the former Soviet Union before.
Yeah. Right. I'm not certain how they would.
Well, not
do
with
it
Stalin.
exactly,
I guess he
but-
died in the end and just died.
Yes.
But he was de-Stalinified. Although Putin's doing his best to bring him back.
Yeah. Well, it's his best model. This guy survived all the way to the end. I want to do that too. But yeah, I don't know how they get rid of him. And my first guess is they're probably gonna have to kill him. Or I guess he could find himself cornered and be talked into retirement. Which is just them
It's
saying,
possible.
"Well, we won't kill you, but we will if you don't retire." Oh, well, all right. Who knows? I'm not sure. But I think you may be
It's
onto
got to
something.
happen internally.
Yeah.
One factor could be China.
Well, yeah,
But I get the
guess.
sense from what I've read that Xi really feels he has a soulmate in Putin.
Oh well.
Yeah. That he is as cloistered and as protected from reality as Putin is, that he is in the same mindset of being the supreme leader and sees Putin as his equal in that. Whether that's true or not, it's really hard to know in closed societies like this, although Putin certainly opened a window into his thinking in this attack. I don't know if that's all true or not, but I don't know that, with Xi in charge, we can necessarily count on China coming forward to help us here.
Yeah.
Well, and that it would be
it wouldn't be
one of the things that could sway Putin, I would think. Breaking with China and truly isolating him is pretty key, but I don't know that China's ready to do that. So
yeah, well,
this is going to be such a long slog.
It could be, and we'll have to. I don't know, nothing to do but wait and see on that one. I could see Xi going either with, I see, I see myself in him and him in me, and I'll do what I can to preserve his power, or saying, well, we had a lot in common, but alas, your time is over. Mine isn't, and I don't want to go your way, so I'll pull the rug out from under you and say, I didn't know you that well, but have a nice life.
And other than the natural resources, there's really not a whole lot China can get out of Russia.
I don't imagine.
Other than this ally, geopolitically, they're connected. Yeah. Although the center of politics, of course, in Russia is Moscow, and it's a really, really, really long way from China.
Yeah, right. But they share a border, and
but in terms of the balance of power, China could end up standing alone. I mean, we've always seen Russia not as necessarily a superpower, but able to provide enough weight to China to provide that balance that they become the superpower versus the United States and NATO. And now Russia proving to be sort of a paper bear, as David Neer likes to call them, militarily.
Okay.
Except for the nukes.
Yeah.
Does
Maybe.
Russia still give, an alliance with Russia still give China that much heft? And does it isolate them further that Russia is proving to be not so adept when it comes to warfare? Is Russia going to be important internationally anymore? Does China see that, decide it needs to work on relations with the West? Or does China say, well, we'll, pick Russia up in a fire sale and go on our own?
Maybe, yeah, right. We'll take your planes and your Navy and see you later. I guess that's...
And of course there are the nukes.
Yep.
Russia has more nukes than any other country.
Yeah. And
which is why we have to be really careful when we're talking about things like no-fly zones and
right.
Committing any kind of force directly to Ukraine.
Yes, and that seems to be a generational thing too. Is that no-fly zones have kind of for a long time gone smoothly because the reason you're able to impose a no-fly zone is the other people are in no position to oppose it, and so it gets imposed. And while there are occasional violations, it never made any sense. So I don't think anybody has ever seen a no-fly zone go wrong because we only impose them on people that we can squash.
Right.
So, why not you can't just say that, no-fly zone for Russia. We should just declare a no-war zone, and then the whole thing will be over.
Right.
They're not going to listen to that. That's the problem.
No, and I haven't read it yet. I see there's an argument now from a bunch of academics around DC saying, well, we can have a limited no-fly zone. No. You can't.
I don't know what you would call it, but sometimes fly zone.
And
it doesn't work.
Yeah. If you say no-fly zone in any way, Putin's going to say that's Russia or that's NATO declaring war on me, and all bets are off.
Well,
and he's already told us he's going to do that.
Okay. Well, it's a question of whether we believe him or not, and you don't want to find out, certainly. We should be talking to nuclear experts about. I have questions. Do nuclear missiles need to be maintained the same way these truck tires do.
Yeah, I've been really worrying about that a lot too.
I wonder, and I don't know whether that's a good worry to have, like, well, maybe they just won't launch, or maybe it's bad in some way. I don't know exactly how, but like, what if they couldn't get those things out of the silos because they haven't been maintained? But I don't know if you have to or not. Who knows?
Or, what if once they're out of the silos because they haven't been maintained?
What
I
could
worry
happen?
about this
Yeah.
one a lot, and I really would like to
Okay.
have nuclear regulators be able to go into Russia to see the state of their systems.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible that everybody has been responsible and knows the danger, and so all of the effort they have not put into their standard military stuff, they're putting into maintaining the nukes.
Maybe. I don't know. You can
Maybe
hope.
there's a lot left. I think that probably a lot of the money that was supposed to be going into building up tanks and making sure everything was operational and taking care of everything went into pockets of oligarchs and Russian officials instead.
Yeah.
So I know that a lot of the problem with the military is corruption. I don't know if it's the same with the nuclear forces.
Yeah.
So,
No way
I
to know,
very,
and-
very much like international nuclear regulators to be able to go in there and see.
Yeah. Also, but yeah, I would put that as a slightly lower possibility than the no-fly zone at this point.
Yeah.
So,
But put it at the top of the
Sure.
wish list for if somehow out of this we don't have Putin anymore.
right. Can you swing by Tehran on your way?
That too.
Sure.
Too.
Just checking. I mean, yeah, nobody's going to allow it, but ask. That's good, and maybe you put that request in now, and then whatever comes next, if there is an opportunity and someone deposes Putin, and the next people to take control are favorably inclined, fine. I mean, actually, your discussion of the committee of soldiers' mothers, I got to get the name right. Mothers of soldiers, soldiers' mothers. It's interesting that, they would be, I wonder, this is an interesting organization in general, but the credibility that they have in Russia, and I guess it's just hard everywhere to deny, the mothers of soldiers who fought for Russia, so it gives them a particular political credibility. But when you were talking about them, I just got this flash of that would make an interesting direction for succession politically, like in the Lech Walesa tradition and the Václav Havel tradition. Don't know if they have that tradition there, but maybe. But an interesting way of having somebody, it'd be the only hope of seeing someone who could succeed to power there that wouldn't automatically be in oligarch mode, like I'm going to loot the place, and I might give a nod to more freedom because that's what it'll get me in position to be the chief oligarch and steal the most, versus no, we want to have honest to goodness, if not necessarily democratic reform, then real openness anyway, and less dependence on military might and police state. That might be the way to go, or where it lands anyway. I don't know whether they're really open to that or whether there's just
that would be the hope.
Yeah,
that would be the hope.
Well,
you can be encouraged by the fact that these are the largest protests we've seen in Russia ever. From what we know, the information's been rather tightly controlled, but something like 13,000 or more people have been arrested in protests since the invasion began.
Yes, right.
And in the face of knowing that the police are going to come out and arrest people en masse, they are still going out en masse to protest.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing when you know what's coming for you.
And, maybe Anonymous can hack enough TV stations to get that news out to everybody in Russia that, yes, this is happening.
Well, yeah, I guess using the internet to do it, it's certainly a possibility, and I would advise maybe it's something you want to set up on, schedule, timer, and flee before it happens and be out of the country when, at 12:01 a.m. The website turns over to telling the truth. But don't stick around.
They've had some limited success in doing that. I don't know whether it's hackers in Russia or hackers outside of Russia, but Anonymous has been able to change the programming at a few places and change websites.
Yeah, well, that makes a big difference. Sending a television and radio signals into the heart of Russia is just not a real capability, I don't think. Although maybe satellite makes it more possible.
Maybe.
But the internet, I guess, seems like the best and easiest and cheapest way in. So, we'll applaud their efforts and see if that happens. I do
on the home front.
Yes, I do feel obligated to turn to that.
Because, of course, we end up not having government funding after midnight Friday.
Right, because you're here and you know what that means.
Yeah,
the government's going to shut down.
Government shutdown watch.
Right.
Joe.
Well, yeah, so what Friday is our current CR expiration, right? The 11th?
Yes.
Okay. And I see you've written already here, the Senate Republicans threatening government shutdown in order to do what? I don't know, but it will also...
In order to, I don't know what either. And it got even worse overnight.
Oh, what happened? Where are we?
Mitch McConnell is holding up his end, his side. He is not agreeing to continuing funding for universal school lunches. In the bill.
That's what's... He couldn't think of something like inherently evil sounding or wasteful?
He had to go for maximum evil. He's holding up government funding. He's holding up Ukraine aid.
Yes, I mean, that's the upshot of it.
Yeah.
And that he won't admit to.
As of right now, the things are connected. Ukraine aid goes with this omnibus spending bill. The House is still moving toward bringing it to the floor tomorrow, probably. They think that they can have the text done today, vote on it tomorrow morning, head off to Philadelphia for their 3-day, or now possibly 2-day retreat.
Okay.
All ready to come back on Friday if they have to do whatever they've done once the Senate gets through with it. So that's where we're at. But yeah, as of now, Mitch McConnell is saying, no, we can't feed all of the school children.
Yeah, why would you do that?
It's Mitch McConnell.
What an odd... I mean, yeah, I guess he realizes he can't attach himself directly to I'm stopping Ukraine aid, so he has to pick something else. He's like,
I think the ultimate goal probably is to try to decouple Ukraine aid from the rest of the spending bills. Probably Ukraine aid and Pentagon funding. Possibly get those two things passed as a standalone, have a continuing resolution for the rest. And, I think probably optimally in McConnell's world, it would be keeping on a continuing resolution for the duration of this year until the elections.
Yeah, I'm sure you would like that. Adding Ukraine aid to the continuing resolution would at least move us a little bit away from the Trump budget blueprint. We actually helped. But
so it's sort of back to
the
decoupling fight we had over Build Back Better and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right now they're connected.
Yes.
There's a big effort to split them apart.
Okay.
On this side, though, progressives in the House would pretty much like to be able to vote yes for Ukraine aid, but, in their tradition, not vote for defense spending, rather. So the players are a little bit different this time around.
All right.
But it being split apart is probably what we're going to see happen.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it makes sense for both sides of the Capitol for different reasons, and both sides of the aisle inside each side for even a third reason on top of that. Okay. Well, as long as it gets done, I suppose. I haven't seen or detected any appetite for an actual shutdown. That hasn't changed?
That hasn't changed.
Okay, well, that's good.
Well, I mean, there's always the appetite from the Ted Cruz's Rand Paul.
Well, yeah.
Always.
So.
But they're not going to prevail this time. They are running out of time, though.
Yeah.
To get a CR to the floor and pass. But that could be what Hoyer's talking about on making sure people are ready to come back to D.C. on Friday.
Okay, so the retreat, not far away, Philadelphia. Good luck.
We could end up seeing a mini shutdown. You know.
Brief.
We could end up going the weekend without government funding, but
I guess that's a possibility because engineering everybody getting back in time and Republicans with reason to make mischief. Who knows? Good luck getting a seat on an Amtrak train between Philadelphia and D.C. on Friday if that happens. But all right. Well, maybe they'll all drive. We can have a convoy back. That's it. We'll all wave flags at them. And we'll go and airlift them. Okay, well, thanks for bringing us up to date. A very interesting discussion. And so interesting that all of your Russian studies training coming back. An unfortunate way.
It's a muscle I haven't worked in a while. Kind of interesting.
Okay, well, I'll send you any other articles that I find about the committee here. I am going to go back and dig that one up. I appreciate it. A good turn and interesting twist of events for us. So I appreciate the discussion. We'll talk to you again next week.
Kagro.
Okay, take care. Time for us to turn things over to Justice now.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That's right, you have been, and that's your problem, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, what's up next? Of course, Justice in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What do we have on the menu today? A proposed EPA rule would make heavy trucks cut smog and soot pollution. That would seem like a good idea. And the Supreme Court has turned away efforts from Republicans in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, I'm just going to go on here, to block state-ordered congressional district maps. Okay, time to turn it over to Justice.